Mr. Keith, you are live on the air. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you, and good morning to you both. Rabbi, I wanted to ask, in both your book and the CDs, or the audio files now, you discuss Matthew chapter 2, verses 5 and 6, where Matthew is supposedly quoting from Micah chapter 5, verse 1. And Matthew is saying the eschatological Messiah will come from Bethlehem. And you explain about the Moabites and how Ruth is not under that curse, and that Micah is talking about King David coming from Bethlehem, not Jesus. But I wanted to ask, as I start to think about this and do what you've been teaching, which is to say what's the context of the chapter and the book itself, and that the verse numbers and chapters are artificial. When I'm going through Micah chapter 4, and I see that it's clearly talking about end days, it's saying on that day and in that day. So chapter 4 is clearly talking about end times and the eschatological Messiah. So then when you hit chapter 5, verse 1, and it's saying he will come from Bethlehem, I'm having trouble with that because Micah's first temple, period, so he's much after David. So if he's talking in chapter 4 about end times, why is chapter 5, verse 1 going like back in time? How could that be about David if he's in first temple way after David? If you could help me understand this, and I would appreciate it.
So it's very, very simple. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Keith, go ahead and have an opportunity for answer. Thank you.
So there's quite a bit in there to unpack. So first, there is in Deuteronomy chapter 23 that a Moabite cannot enter the congregation of Israel. Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David, was in fact a Moabite. From the text itself, that would preclude Ruth from being the progenitor of David, Solomon, and Mashiach. It is nowhere in the Bible where there's a distinction to be made between a male descent of Moab and a female. However, the oral Torah alone makes this distinction, and that is that this prohibition of Deuteronomy 23 only refers to men and not women. If you look at the context of Deuteronomy 23, you'll see why is it that Moabites cannot join the Klal Hashem. The Torah says there because when you came out of Egypt, they didn't greet you on the way with bread and water, 23 verse 4. Given that women were never expected to come out and greet foreign armies, only men would do that, so therefore this prohibition of Deuteronomy 23:3 only applies to men, not to women, and therefore Ruth was perfectly suited to be the great-grandmother of David, Shlomo, and ultimately the Mashiach. The magnitude of this point cannot be overstated because Christians foolishly, not that all Christians are fools, is they're being guided, the blind are leading the blind, and they're being told by their Christian leaders that the oral Torah is an invention of the rabbis. But they don't it's a trap. This is why I care about Christians, because I know they don't mean badly. They're not bad faith actors, generally speaking. Their leaders are, especially the ones with titles. Their leaders, I mean, those who really, there's some who know this, but they're just, but the followers, the parishioners that fill the pews of churches like the Assemblies of God and Baptist, they have no clue. They wouldn't know what the oral Torah is if it hit them over the head. They don't know what rabbinic Judaism is. They don't know anything. That's why I care about them. And people wonder, why am I so patient with them? I am, because they don't know any better. They're not bad faith actors. Is it true that they're getting their information from stupid books written by conniving missionaries who play with their heads? Yeah. That's exactly what's happening. And they simply do not have the utensils. They don't have the background knowledge and information to be able to, they're told what they want to hear and they don't research it. And that's unfortunate. Okay, let's go now to Micah chapter 5, verse 1 in a Hebrew Bible, and the same passage as Micah 5:2 in a Christian Bible. And you're quite right. In Matthew's infancy narrative, meaning in Matthew chapter 2, we are told that wise men from the east are looking for the newborn Jesus. And they make a stopover in Jerusalem at Herod's palace. Where can we find the boy? It's like the star knows exactly how to get from Persia to Jerusalem, but has no clue of where the Mashiach is supposed to be born. These are all plot devices, and I don't want to go any further on this point. But Herod, of course, he wouldn't know a Bible if it hit him over the head. So we are told that the priests and the elders inform these Gentiles from the east that, in fact, the Messiah is to be born in Bethlehem, because there's a passage in Micah, which is quoted in Matthew chapter 2, which says that you, Bethlehem Ephratah, although you are little among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth one who will be a ruler in Israel. So now, if you just stop there and don't read any further, it does sound exactly, the passage clearly is conveying. If there was no modifier at the end of this passage, it would clearly be stating that the Mashiach is supposed to be born in Bethlehem. Do you got that? Very clear. The ruler, the Moshel, that's the word for ruler in this thing, is supposed to come from Bethlehem. Bethlehem, by the way, and many people don't know this, but Bethlehem is very close to Jerusalem. Very close. You can easily walk from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Okay, so if you stop there, and Matthew wants you to stop there, because Matthew chapter 2 says, and he will be a shepherd over Israel. Matthew doesn't want you to know that there's a modifier at the end of the passage. And the modifier at the end of the passage is umoitzoisav, and his origins is mikedem. Kedem means from the old days. Mimei olam, from ancient times. Okay? That's all. So now you're trying to parse this whole thing. Now, Matthew does not want you to see the modifier, because who is born in Bethlehem? David, who is born in Bethlehem, not the future Mashiach. So again, if you read Micah 5, verse 2 in a Christian Bible, if you stop short and just say that out of you, Bethlehem, will come forth a leader, without the modifier, without the last 4 words at the end, 4 words in Hebrew, without the last, and there's an esnachta, which means an unambiguous semicolon there, okay? If you don't read those last 4 words, umoitzoisav miked mimei olam, those 4 words, you should properly interpret Micah 5, 1/2, as the Mashiach is supposed to be born in Bethlehem. But it's not telling us the Mashiach was born in Bethlehem, but rather it's telling us that that Bethlehem is, although would not be so prominent, but the Mashiach's ancestor is coming from Bethlehem. What does Matthew do to hide this from his readers? It's very easy for him. All he does is he stuffs in there that he will be a shepherd over Israel, and what he's doing is he's skipping a couple of verses and slamming them together and eviscerating the middle. Do you understand? Now, you asked something about history, so this is really easy, okay? This is really easy. It's not complicated. This magic trick is very simple. So Micah, Olav Hashalom, of blessed memory, he lived during the Assyrian Empire, and in fact, his contemporaries are very famous, and you know all of them. Micha's contemporaries he lived here in Yerushalayim, and his neighbor was Isaiah, meaning Isaiah and Micah, both lived in Jerusalem roughly 2,700 years ago. In the northern part of Eretz Israel, were two other prophets that you know. One of them was Amos. Amos was from this area in Judea, but he was stationed in the north to prophesy to the northern kingdom and also the south as well. And Hosea also lives. So you have four. Now there were many other Nevi'im during that time, but very four that you're famous. That are famous for. So let's just do a little history now, okay? Isaiah lived roughly 2,700 years ago, as did Micha. So Micha lived 2,700. David HaMelech of blessed memory lived 3,000 years ago. You got it? So King David lived 3,000 years ago. Micah lived 3 centuries later. Micha is speaking not only to his audience, the people before him, and he is expressing ecstatic prophecies. Part of it, incidentally, from chapter 4, he is copying Isaiah chapter 2. He's repeating over Isaiah's prophecy, chapter 2. That's why in Isaiah it says, this is my vision. Micha is only quoting him, so Micha doesn't say it's his vision, which is all good. So Micha is saying 2,700 years ago that in the future there's going to be someone who's a Moshel. That means Micha doesn't call him a Mashiach. He's calling him a ruler, which is the Mashiach. And if you want to know who that Mashiach, what his origins are, his origins go back to Bethlehem. How? Because he's born in Bethlehem? No. It's Umoitsaisav Mikedmei Olam. And the connection that the future Mashiach, I'm paraphrasing, so it's very clear. If you want to know what is the relationship between the future Mashiach, that his origins from ancient times comes from Bethlehem. Who is that? It's David HaMelech. And this kind of language, Mimei Olam, Kimei Olam, always means the old days, ancient times. For instance, see Micah chapter 7, verse 14, just as an example. Same language. It means the old days. It means, the way things were in the old times. That's all. Very simple. Again, what does Matthew do? He has to tamper with this text. This is why I care very deeply about Christians, because the way Matthew chapter 2, verse 6 ends, there'll be a ruler who will shepherd over my people Israel. But that's not how the verse ends. You follow? And then there are even more naughty Christian translators that will insert in that, he'll come from ancient times, from eternity, which is nonsense. Mimei Olam means from the days of old, ancient times, as that phrase appears, I believe, 7 times in Tanakh. I believe. It's in volume 1 of Let's Get Biblical, where I show every single point, every single place, and they all render it correctly in all the other places except here. So that's also me, again, just is not complicated. 2,700 years of a prophet who says that there's going to be a future Mashiach. He doesn't use the word Mashiach, a future ruler who has a connection to Bethlehem. And the end of Micah chapter 5, verse 1 or 2, depending on Jewish or Christian Bible, the connection is from the old days. Now, if Micha is standing and saying this 2,700 years ago, and is referring to the old days, I mean, he's talking about a time prior to Micha. In this case, he's talking about a time 3 centuries earlier. King David of blessed memory was born in Bethlehem. See 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is mind-blowing that Matthew would play with this, and it's even more insane that Christians don't notice this. Anyways, thank you so much for your thoughtful question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.